just want to apologise to anyone who was waiting. We're a little bit late because myself and Dave were testing the equipment to make sure that you could see us and hear us and everything. So yeah, we're live now. So yeah, I mean, me and Dave had a little conversation yesterday on the phone, and these are strange times for everybody. We're talking about like my business, because obviously I go in and out of people's houses. That's kind of been knocked, but a lot of businesses during these times are flying, and Fishscience is seems to be one of them. So how's things been for Fishscience then, Dave?
Yeah, it's been surprisingly good. I expected, when we had all the restrictions imposed at the end of March, I really did expect things to start being difficult. But I think fish keepers have just found ways of obtaining products from wherever they can get them. Shops have been really innovative and have been offering click and collect and delivery services and limiting numbers of people going into stores. So I think people have still been able to get hold of products. And for me, it's just been great. The business has actually grown significantly in the time that we've been locked down, which is completely the opposite of what I expected, I must admit. But it certainly seems to have polarized. As we were talking before, that there are certainly some stores, some that are still closed, and some that are struggling with finding an innovative way of getting around the problems. But then there are others that are really strong and seem to be doing really well.
Yeah, I mean, we got a couple of people in now. I'd like to shout out Pete and Riverwood Aquatics and Duncan at Fish Cove.
Yeah.
I know John's watching because he's on the Fishscience channel. one of my customers is watching. Shout out to Bully Vision as well, UK. Yeah, I've noticed on their social media that especially with Fish Cove now, Duncan has just started back doing, because they do the maintenance as well on the side, and I've seen a few pictures of him going into places sort of gloved up and masked up and that, and so yeah, hats off to those guys for flying the flag still. I mean, I'm not quite that confident yet with some of my clients, because some of them have got children, and you know how hard children are to control. And I see that Pete at Riverwoods, he's still been sort of one in, one out, social distancing, ordering and things like that. People pre-ordering and prepaying and stuff, which is cool. It's good to see him ticking over, because I remember when Riverwood first launched as a store, I invited them to sponsor the group, my group on Facebook, and since then it's been really good. They seem to have done really well. So yeah, it's good to see the local shops, and a lot of the good shops will still seem to be carrying on. And then you usually find it's not the bad shops as such, but you usually find it's the same old story. Joe Blogs is moaning that this lockdown's affecting the business, but they're not really doing anything to change that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think also there's there are shops and businesses that are doing innovative things and really taking advantage of the situation. One of the problems seems to be getting the actual sort of living items into stores. So
yeah,
it'd be difficult to get hold of fish because of the cost of shipping from the Far East or from wherever, and also I'm guessing plants must be just the same.
I had to order plants recently from Aquaflora, and I had no issue getting them over at all.
Oh, that's good.
But then they're Europe, so you know they came straight to my house. It was for my own tank. I was trying to get it ready for a competition. And like I said to you yesterday, I'm glad I took the picture when I did, because now I'm full of algae where I let my CO2 run out. I wasn't paying attention. That's what it was.
All changes quickly if you don't keep on top of it, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Well, so the next tank is going to be a lot simpler and less stressful.
No,
yeah.
I don't blame you. I mean, there's a lot of people. It's interesting, you know. Obviously, you know exactly what you're talking about. You're a real specialist in doing it. But there's so many people that come into the hobby and keep fish for a while and almost overcomplicate it, and then can't keep going with the complication, and they drop out, which is a shame.
Yeah.
You know, that simplicity and making it a pleasure. That's part of it. So,
that's right. Yeah, that's it. So I hear Fishscience have some new product lines on the horizon. Cichlid pellets, better food, shrimp food. So what's happening with that? How far away are we from seeing those on the shelves?
Yeah, well, we're always looking at new foods and always probably working about between 6 and 12 months ahead, just to try and get products and get them tested and make sure that they're actually effective before, and you know, work properly before we launch them. So, you know, just going through the foods that you've mentioned, the first one is the improved beta granules. They're the beta granules that we launched, it must be two and a half years ago, have been really popular. But the one issue that I was a little concerned about was that because they're a granule, and granules you make by sort of making a pellet and then smashing it, and you know, and getting rid of or sieving it to a certain size. The trouble is that you do get some powder in there, because it just as they get knocked around in the pots. So with the beta granules, we've actually amended the format of the food more than the formula, so that it's a more consistent size and it'll be a lot better. It's a 0.8 millimeter floating pellet, which will be, you know, great for most of the splendens and you know, the sort of not the real juveniles, but probably, you know, a third half grown and upwards will be fine with it. Still the same formula, still using the insect meal, still using the natural colour enhancers, garlic, but just the format's improved.
Oh, great.
The other food that I'm sure Duncan did a lot, gave me a lot of help with just trying it out, is the shrimp sticks. This is a food, I would guess, we've got the label. The product will be being produced in the next 2 or 3 weeks, so I would hopefully have it, let's say, between a month and 2 months on the outside. And it's just a little 4 millimeter long by 1 millimeter wide stick that's got the sort of the vegetable base that the shrimps need. We've got alfalfa in there, which is a great ingredient for the shrimps. Also got some of the shell in there. So we've got krill shell, which is fantastic, boosts the calcium levels, and that can be utilised by the shrimps. So as I say, Duncan helped us quite a lot when we first came out with it. And what I tend to do is I get the product, and then we get a number of people just to try it for us, and people that know what they're talking about. You know?
Yeah, because I've tested a couple of foods for you in the past. I think I tested the worm pellets when they first came out, before you even had a label or a pot for them, and they went down in my tank of storm. Everything ate them.
Yes, yeah, and it's important. You know, it's easy in a way to produce a food that works in a bare tank. So if you were doing very, very laboratory style trials, you would just have a bare tank with a fixed weight of fish. You feed a fixed amount of food, and you measure the waste production, you measure the growth of the fish, you measure all sorts of things in that way. But that's not real fish keeping. You know, that's not what you've done with your tank. You know, people overfeed, they tend to overstock, they they very often overfilter and then underfilter and then clean the so the systems change, and the food's got to be able to cope with that.
I'm a firm believer in leaving everything running when I feed. Whereas some people will say, "Ooh, turn the filters off, turn any wave makers off, turn any power heads off." And I'm like, "Well, why? Fish got to work for their food. They got to work for it in the wild. You don't just food. I mean, okay, sometimes if you've got a fast flowing stream and you're a pleco and you're swimming against the current of food's coming towards you, it's different. Or if you're a fan shrimp and you're grabbing it out of the water column. But in general, a schooling fish or shoaling fish or any sort of a large majority of fish will have to work for their food. They'll have to swim. They'll have to catch it, especially if they're predatory. So my line of thinking, perhaps it's just me, I don't know if anybody else is the same as me, but I just think they should work for their food. They should swim and pick their food. They're kept in a closed environment, so it's like have a decent flow in the tank so they've got something to swim. Make them chase the granule around the tank, because it's kind of the sort of eye brain thinking, "Ooh, that thing's flying past me. I better go. I better grab it." And it's funny because I've seen fish do it. Even though they don't like something, they'll grab it, they'll sort of chew it a little bit and spit it out, and then another fish will come along and then they'll eat that. That's one of the parts of fish keeping I think myself and a lot of other people can relate with. And you yourself, you've gone into the foods as a business. So you must still have a passion for it there somewhere.
Oh, absolutely. No, I love it. As you know, I used to work for Tetra. Worked for them for a long time.
Good old Tetra Prima back in the day.
Yeah, Prima and the crisp and all sorts of products, and fantastic products. When I left Tetra, my plan wasn't to get back into the fish food market, but the opportunity to come out with a range of insect meal based foods and really
because
that natural.
The only other one that I've seen on the market is fluval bug bites, and I'm not sure whether that came out around about the same time as the Fishscience stuff.
No, it was later.
Was it later?
It was probably 2 years, maybe even 3 years after we'd done the foods. There are other foods. I know Danila have a food that uses insect meal, and there's a few companies added it just as a minor ingredient, but only in the occasional food. So we actually had the opportunity with Protix, the company that actually grow the black soldier fly in Holland, had the opportunity to trial that and actually trial a food made from it and develop it and formulate it. And really we were one of the first, if not the first company to commercialize their insect meal that they were producing. And now we're just one of many. They're producing the insect meal is being used for dog food, it's used for poultry, it's used for game birds, used for aquaculture.
Yeah, because they're on about humans should be eating more insects as opposed to animal protein to try and save the planet.
And that'll definitely happen. I was lucky enough to go along to a conference where they were discussing insect meal, and people were presenting research on different insects and how they could grow them and the benefits of them. But the one thing that I took away from the conference was that there's probably, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of different insects that potentially could be cultured, and of those 100,000 or hundreds of thousands, you can also feed them on different foods to impact the nutrition that you've got. So you've got unlimited nutritional profile from the insects to be able to deliver what pretty much any animal wants, and humans as well. So it's quite amazing what they will be able to do with that as well.
We can't talk too much about eating insects because Amy's just joined, fellow Welsh lady, and I know she keeps some creepy crawlies, so we can't talk about eating insects in case she gets upset. No, I know in other countries, they humans regularly consume, lots of insects, crickets and locusts and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly the guys at Protix told me that in 20 years' time we'll all be eating insects. It won't be our only food, but it will be supplementing the foods that we eat, and it probably won't be called insect meal. It'll have some jazzy marketing name, and it'll just be a protein rich
bug burgers.
Yeah, exactly. And evidently they taste really good.
I saw, I can't remember, it was a program, I think a chef program or a cookery program or something, and they did that. I mean, obviously they told people that what they were going to be eating, not just give it to them and then tell them later. They told them, but then obviously they did a blind tasting, so they did like a meat one, a veggie one, an insect one, and I think everyone who tried it said that it tasted lovely, and then they were like, well, that was the insect one, and they were like, oh my god, no. And but I think it's just our own personal sort of trying to get over that in your head, isn't it? We're eating bugs,
Yeah, but it's the same. If you were told you were eating fungus, I don't know, somehow that's another thing, or bacteria, those sort of things. You probably wouldn't want to eat it, but it's actually, we're all doing it.
Yeah, when you say mushroom, it's not quite so bad then, is it?
No, exactly.
So, a little birdie tells me you've got a range of cichlid foods out as well. Is that a floating stick then, or is that a sinking pellet, or what's that?
Yeah, at the moment, the food that's just coming online in, again, probably the same sort of time scale as the shrimp food, is a floating cichlid pellet. So
is that for like South American and Central American cichlids or Malawi?
No, it's not the Malawis. We've got two foods for Malawis. We've got a flake food which has got the spirulina, chlorella, kelp, pea, spinach, real strong vegetable base, and we also have a pelleted version of that. But then we've now got this South American floating cichlid stick, so aimed at the medium large fish. It'll be a roughly 5 mil long and 3.5 mil wide pellet.
So you're probably talking for fish like severums and Oscars and
I think people with adult Oscars will probably want a bigger pellet, but having said that, I'm a fan of small pellets. I prefer fish to, like you were saying before, prefer fish to work for what they eat rather than just have one big mouthful.
Yeah, it's the same with koi, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think with a lot of the tropical species, one of the problems you've got, if you give them, say an 8 mil pellet, they'll eat it. They've got the ability to do it, but they'll eat it straight away and it's still dry, and then it absorbs moisture in the intestine of the fish. Mm. So it actually swells in their intestine, and if they've gorged themselves, then that can cause a bit of a problem.
You get swim bladder
small foods. Yeah, if you feed 3-4 mil pellets, then they've already got quite a lot of water on them when they're consumed, and therefore they don't swell as much. I found that
with a couple of mine. If I feed it, because I've got a range of fish, the largest is my LO75 Pecalita Plecostomus, which I haven't seen him eat anything except for the glass. I don't know. I put algae wafers in there for him, but I don't think he eats them. And I've got everything in there from, what's my smallest fish? I don't know. Say I got a few small like red tail rasboras in there, which are still juveniles, and then I've got some larger tetra in there at the minute. But I'll find that like the smallest fish will try and grab like the largest bit of food and then like swim around with it in their mouth. It's like, what are you doing? It's too big for you.
They love it, and it's part of that is down to making sure that the food tastes good and they want to eat it. So that's with the cichlid pellet. We've made it. I saw there was a question came up about what's in it, and the food uses insect meal. We've got I forget the exact amount, but it's about 20-25% insect meal. It's got earthworm in it. It's got mealworm in it. It's got a lot of the ingredients of the worm pellets. but it's also got shrimp. It's got some herring meal in because, of course, those bigger cichlids are fish eaters. So
yes,
an element of fish meal in there. So,
I just go on. Sorry.
I was going to say, and it certainly triggers that good feeding response, and that's true of pretty much any size of fish. They all seem to pick and peck at it, which is great. So hopefully that will it should be available. And again, I can't say exactly, because under normal circumstances we can go from finishing the trials to getting the product out in a couple of months. But just at the moment, one of the things that we are having with is getting hold of the ingredients.
Yeah.
There's some delays in getting, for example, the worm meal and insect meal, but it's improving all the time. So I'm hopeful that kind of by the end of July we'll have all of these products available, and then on to the next ones. We've kind of discus food.
That's what we need. Discus food.
I know you've been asking me for a long time about.
I've got a lot of
discus.
I've got a lot of people that, including myself, because like I said to you yesterday on the phone, this 90 centimeter is going to be switched out for a 120 centimeter, and I'm going back to discus. So, yeah, I don't want to go back to my old regime. I want to try something else, and I think from what I've seen with other fish, especially other cichlids like my angels, when I tried the worm pellets in the 125 that I had, my old tank in the dining room, they absolutely annihilated the worm pellets. And if any other fish come anywhere near them, they were chasing them away. So, I mean, discus and angels are not too dissimilar. So I think that could be a good basis for a discus food.
That's what we're looking at, but also adding probably a little bit more shrimp into it.
Garlic.
Shrimp and krill. It's got
Krill.
garlic in it. A slightly bigger pellet as well. The worm pellets are one and a bit millimeter diameter. So for the discus, and certainly the adult discus, we would need to go a little bit bigger. So probably up to 2.5 mil.
How difficult would it be to make, say, a mixture of sizes in a pot? So you might have some small, medium, and large. So because if you, for argument's sake, if you've got a mixture of discus, you might have some smaller, some larger. Is that possible? Because I know lots of people.
I mean, it's very possible, but practically it wouldn't work. The problem you would have is as the pot gets shaken and as you sort of take the food from the top, you'll find that the small
sink to the bottom.
Sink to the bottom. So
makes sense. The only way you could probably do it then is if you did it in the sort of bloodworm frozen capsules where it's like foil sealed and you've got like an individual portion. That's probably the only way you could do that.
Or the other way is to do sort of two sizes, so people can have a pot of each. And
yeah, that's true. And just add each.
That would be an option.
Duncan's brought up the whole beef heart thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the beef hearts, in terms of commercially, beef hearts are no, because any company after the BSE issue, any company that wants to export foods around the world can't use animal products in their factories. So I remember at the time of BSE, I was working for Tetra, and at the time Tetra didn't have any animal material, no beef, no pork, no lamb used in any of the foods. But even then, we had to. I think there was some like gelatin in there, which is obviously comes from an animal.
Bones.
And that any machinery that had got that had to be completely cleaned and sterilised. And now you'll find Sierra, Tetra, JBL, ourselves, and anybody that's doing fish food on a commercial scale won't use any animal ingredients just because of that. So beef heart might be, you and I had the conversation about, is beef heart the right thing for discus? I mean, I don't know where, where did discus get the idea that they like beef heart? But, we certainly wouldn't be able to put beef heart into the foods. we
I
have
mean,
to go down the natural route with, and it would fit with our.
yeah, I mean, in my personal opinion, I'm very much in favour of as close to natural diet as you possibly can in a closed system. So to answer people's questions about beef heart, would you find beef heart in a river? Not unless a cow accidentally fell in. No, you wouldn't. It wouldn't happen. The fish would live majority on insects, invertebrates, and pretty much whatever vegetable matter they could scavenge, whether it's algae or bits of anything like that. I mean, the fish may like it. Of course they might. You know, it's like us. I like chocolate. But if you sat here and ate 2 kilos of chocolate, then you're going to get fat. It's the same with discus. I mean, you're a doctor, and I don't know if lots of people who are tuned in realize what you did before you did fish foods. And I think we touched on this in our conversation yesterday about the fat stores that you found in fish when you've had to dissect them in comparison to, say, their wild counterparts.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. It's frightening. You know, my background is fish disease. My PhD was looking at a tapeworm of carp, a thing called Bothriacephalus achilognathi, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's a tapeworm that you find in koi carp. So part of the research and since then has been actually, you know, dissecting fish and looking for the parasite, and also doing health checks on fish. And it's surprising how many fish, and particularly ornamental fish, you find the liver is just engorged. It's enlarged because of the diet. You find that there's big fat deposits, and that's because we all tend to overfeed our fish. You know, it's human nature. You go in front of the tank, the fish are looking to be fed, and you
kill them with kindness.
And you also feed a little bit more than you should. You know, the one thing, and it was one of the research scientists at Tetra that kind of really stressed it to me. He said, you know, if you look at the ingredient list on any food, any of the commercial foods, you'll find moistures in there, and it is usually between 6 and 8% moisture. If you look at a bloodworm, it is around about 90% water and 10% protein and skin and muscle and what have you. So, you know, the difference between a flake food and a live food is, the flake food is something like 10 times more concentrated.
Yeah.
So you need 10 times less. If you think a big pinch of bloodworm would be great to feed a certain number of fish, you need 1/10 of that to get the same benefits with a flake or a pelleted food. So it really is important. The other thing that, you know, just touching on that, it's important to realise that in the wild, you know, you were saying it with the discus will eat probably 30, 40, 50 different types of food. You know,
Yep.
It'll be different insects, it'll be different algae, it'll be bacteria, it'll be mulm, it'll be even small fry, it'll be a whole mix of stuff.
Yep.
If all you're doing is feeding one item, be that frozen bloodworm or beef heart or whatever, then you're not giving them that balanced diet.
No, and from fish that I've seen that have been heavily fed on things like on things like beef heart and ox heart and things like that, it's a fatty meat anyway. I mean, the heart, the offal, if you like, is less fatty than, say, the meat of the animal, but it's still got a much higher concentration of fat than, say, turkey or chicken or rabbit or any of the game birds, or even, you know, venison and things like that. Because obviously it goes down the chain. So it's like, if the cattle are fed a certain diet, then obviously they're gonna have more fat stores. And then when you take things like wild game, like rabbit and pheasant and venison, for example, they would have a very low concentration of fat because of what they eat in the wild, in nature. So it's the same with fish. And I've looked at fish because I'm really fussy with my discus. I like them almost perfectly round. I like them to have a red eye. I'm quite funny when it comes to my discus. And the amount of discus I've seen that are a fat, and you just think that looks wrong. It looks
Yeah.
odd. It's like when you see like a Staffordshire Bull Terrier, for example. They're supposed to be like short, stocky dogs that come in at the waist. And when you see ones that have been basically overfed and under-exercised, they look like a barrel with a head.
Yeah.
And you think, that's not right. It doesn't look right, and it can't be healthy either. Now, I wouldn't say, I'm not going to go off on a tangent. I wouldn't say don't ever feed it, because if your fish like it, you can prepare it. It's cheap and they like it as a treat. And feed it as a treat, but don't feed it as a staple.
I think that's the key to it is mixing the diet. So, I've kept limited numbers of discus in the distant past, and the mixes now with beef heart are quite nutritious. They're not just beef heart. There's all sorts of vitamins, minerals, and a lot of people liquidize it and actually add flakes and granules and prepared foods in there.
Yeah,
and that's important to do. But yeah, for I'm just a fan of trying to do things naturally, and that's where I try to make Fishscience a little bit different. So, the beef heart I get, and I think people should use beef heart, but just use it as part of a good diet.
Sparingly.
Yeah, and mix it with other foods, and also
a little bit of what you fancy.
and I'd also be wary about just giving them one food, whatever it is. I'd love everybody in the UK, just to feed Fishscience foods, but
of course you would.
But that's probably not the best thing to do, because Tetra's a good food, and Sierra's a good food, and Vitalis is a good food. So actually mixing different foods. One is it makes sure you get the right nutrition, but secondly, it makes sure the fish don't get that kind of feeding image of one type of food, and then suddenly if you haven't got it, the fish don't feed.
I'm so tempted to show you in my cabinet now the foods I've got in there. It's literally all Fishscience stuff. I've got. Really? Yeah. Hang on, let me have a look. Let me see if I can dig it out. I don't know if the light's very good in there. I'll have a look now.
You're going to tidy it up before you show us now, aren't you?
Not at all. No. What you see is what you get. It's like I said to people, I don't script videos. I don't write all my questions down or nothing beforehand. Let me flick the camera around. I'll show you now. There we go. What have we got? We've got
tropical flake food.
Flake food. Corridora's tablet food. Good old burn pellets. Algae wafers. Micro granules. hang on, there's one more. And tropical fish granule. And there's not a single other food in my cabinet.
Fantastic. But again, by doing that, you're giving them a range of different foods. It isn't just one food, is it?
No, that's right.
Yeah, that's the important. For me, that's the important thing. It's just mixing that flake, granule, whatever tablets.
Right, that's it. That's the Fishscience advertising now. Right now, other companies are also available.
Yes.
No, I just since I tested a lot of your foods, just every fish that I fed it to seems to like it, enjoy it. I mean, I didn't have much success with those holiday pellets that I tried out, the holiday tablets. They didn't seem to go down very well. They kind of sank to the bottom. A couple of fish picked at them for a while, and then they just sat on the bottom. I ended up fishing them out, so they didn't go down too well. But everything else I've tried seems to go down really well. So
yeah, which is great. And even the weekend food, we've had some mixed results. Some fish just go berserk for it, and others, like you say, just kind of look at it and then leave it.
Yeah, I mean they picked at it, but I think they picked at it and then they just left it. So I ended up having to fish it out in the end.
Yeah, which is the important thing. Holiday foods are an interesting thing, because for a short period of time, you don't actually need to feed your fish if you go away, because as we've already said, the fish have got such big fat reserves that they can cope for a few days without any food.
Yeah, I mean, I've left my fish for a week without food, and they're perfectly fine. Feed them before you go away, and then feed them when you come back, and they're fine. I say that to a lot of my customers. They say, "Oh, I'm going away for a week on holiday. Shall I put an auto feeder on?" No, there's no need to.
Yeah, I think the important thing there is just not to do anything massively different in the few days before you go. So don't up the feed massively.
No.
In the few days, because people think that they're doing the right thing, but the trouble is you're just adding more load to the filter, and you can actually affect the water quality and lose everything. So
that's right.
It's important to be just do the normal thing up to the point you're going away, and then don't feed them while you're away.
That's right. And then as soon as you come back, then give them your normal dose of food, and then carry on with your regular regime of feeding. Yeah. What I was going to ask you, I'm not 100% sure, because I don't keep cold water fish, I don't keep pond fish, I don't keep goldfish. Fishscience must do a goldfish food or a carp food or a pond food?
We do both. We've got some goldfish foods that I did, I said before about the testing. We did a lot of tests with the Goldfish Society of Great Britain and got those guys to trial the foods on the, those show quality fish. So we started with a flake food, and we then moved on to a sinking goldfish pellet, which was the food that they particularly wanted. And then we've now got a floating soft pellet as well. And then on the pond side, we have a range of the 3mm diameter pellets, but we have an everyday food. We have a cold weather food, which is a wheat germ based food, and a koi food, which is a richer, more colour enhancing format. And then we mix those three into what we call a variety food. So it's just a mix that gives the fish a bit of variety in the pond.
And is that based on insect meal as well, or? All
insect meal. That's all of the foods. I think the one exception is the oak and algae wafers, in that the fish that's designed for aren't insect eaters. But every other food we've got is insect meal or worm meal is the main ingredient in there, or one of the significant main ingredients.
Because there is a reason why I asked that, because years ago, I kept a few fancy goldfish. I kept Ryukins, I kept Blackmores, and I'd lose them all the time to swim bladder problems.
Okay.
And you may be able to clarify this, but somebody said to me many moons ago, it's because of the shape of the fish. They've got a natural twist in their gut because of the shape of the fish. So I don't know if that's true. Basically, they get blocked up. I don't know if that's true.
No, the swim bladder disorders in goldfish, in the fancy goldfish, are a result of the shape of the body and the fact that they're a much squatter fish than the wild goldfish. So if you think of a comet, the normal common goldfish, it's quite an elongate fish.
The torpedo shape, don't they?
That's it, and the intestine works perfectly. What we've done, or what we as humans have done, is we've bred that fish to make it much shorter and dumpier. But also we've got the swim bladder, which is the flotation device for the fish, and the intestine in these dumpy fish are really close together.
Right.
So if you feed a dry food, a pellet that's got lots of that's not soaked, when it goes in the intestine, it swells. And that puts pressure on the swim bladder and pushes the air in the swim bladder left, right, backwards, forwards, and that unbalances the fish. So you end up with it kind of swimming along that way, or rocking backwards and forwards. So what you've got to do to avoid that is feed smaller pellets. Try and feed them under the surface if you can, just so that they're fully soft.
Would you recommend softening them in water with your fingers?
You can do. You don't need to, but if you've got a fish that's particularly prone to swim bladder disorders, then it makes sense to just soften it for a short space of time in water.
Because it's funny, because I see a lot of when you feed koi, most of the koi food you throw it in and it floats on the surface. The koi come up, and they take heaps of air when they're taking that food. And I just wondered if that has got any bearing on the fancy goldfish, and the ryukins and things going belly up. Would that have anything to do with it? Oh, no,
I don't think so. I think, just touching on the koi first, the koi are nice and elongate, and so the swim bladder and the intestine, although they're next to each other, they're not crammed in together. So even if you get air, or if you get food, masses of food in there that's swelling, it's not going to cause balance problems. With the fancy goldfish, there's a lot of comments, if you look online, if you look in a lot of the older books, that say they take air at the surface and it's the air that unbalanced them. But in all the dissections I've ever done, I've never found a bubble of air in a fancy goldfish. And speaking to some of the real whiz kids on fancy goldfish, people like Andy Green and guys like that have kept them forever, they firmly believe it's just the food in the intestine swelling that causes this problem, and it makes sense. So it's just feeding under the surface on soft food.
So that would lead on to my next question then, with regards to the fish science stuff, because it's sort of more it's insect based. I'm not sure how. I mean, mine seems to take on water very, very quickly and sink very, very quickly. So apart from the floating flake, of course, I mean, that doesn't stay around for long. When that goes in, the fish will fly up and there's none left. But the pellets seem to sink a bit quicker than some of the smaller fish can catch them. So
yeah, we've certainly made the pellets. If they're supposed to sink, we've got to get them to start to sink. So foods, if the difference perhaps between the microgranules, where you've got a food that's almost neutral in density, so it sits in the surface tension and then slowly sinks in the water, and compare that to the tropical granules, which are slightly bigger and more dense, so that they sink a lot quicker. And if you want to get the food down, then you've got to make it quite dense, and it'll absorb water quickly and it'll get down quickly. But what we've started to do is to introduce soft pellets, which have got a slightly higher water content and have got certain ingredients that just keep them from solidifying. So they're not squeezy soft, but they're not hard. You can definitely feel that they give, and that allows them to sink well, but also allows they're almost partly soaked when the fish eat them, so that they're not causing that problem. One thing, it's worth touching on the soaking of foods, because quite a lot of people like to soak foods. The important thing to do if you're soaking a fish food is just soak it in a tiny amount of water. What you don't want is a glass of water with a few pellets in, let them soften and then lift them out and put them into the tank, because a lot of the vitamins and a lot of the water soluble ingredients will have come out of the pellets and be in the water. So you're better using a tiny amount of water that still is retained in the pellet, so all the vitamins and everything are still in the pellet when the fish actually eat it. So perhaps an egg cup, and then just use a pipette to squeeze a little bit of water, a few drops of water on them. Just enough to soften it. It doesn't need to be mushy soft, so it sort of crumbles in your fingers. It's just, and most fish it's no problem, but you do get some of the goldfish that are really impacted by swim bladder disorders or that balance disorder, and if that's the case, then softening the food will certainly help.
And yesterday in our telephone conversation, I don't know if anyone watching is old enough maybe to remember liquefry and fry foods, because I think you've got some fry foods. I think you have.
We've got a powdered fry food, yes.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, but that's liquefries. I think it was the making of Interpet way back by it was Neville Carrington that formulated the liquefry, and that was the start of that company. Yep,
and then before that, we were all using egg yolks.
Egg yolks and infusoria and all sorts of different things.
And it's funny, I bet a lot of people on here now, what if they're still watching, if I haven't bored them to death by now, they probably would never even have heard of it. So yeah, that's why I brought it up. I brought it up with you yesterday because obviously you being in the industry, you would have known about it and probably even used it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, people were, and still are, people look for routes around problems with feeding their fish, and things like the egg yolk, and then in the liquefy, and then there was the other thing was to soak flakes and then squeeze them before in your fingers so that you actually pulverized it to make it into a tiny little when it was just a suspension. There was no big bits in there. There's people have found all sorts of ways to actually feed their fish and feed their fry particularly.
Amy's just popped up now. Too young for egg yolk, she said. Yes, I'm going back. God, a long time ago. I'm trying to think. Do you know what? I'm trying to think what I bred that I fed that on.
Used to be fighting fish, or the anabantoids used to be one.
Do you know what I think it was? I think my mate, he bred half-beaks, and we fed him to half-beaks.
Yeah. Yeah,
and that's
going, so fine.
God, that's going back. That's going back probably. I'm showing my age now. Not quite 20 years. Maybe. Oh God, how long have I? Yeah, almost 20 years probably.
Yeah. You used to hard boil the egg and then put it in a handkerchief and then just squeeze it.
That's right.
The hanky so that you just got the really, really, really fine particles.
That's it.
Yeah, and then, obviously, made that all very easy with the liquefy.
The liquefy, yeah, that's right. And I think I used to feed the rest of it. Then used to go sparingly to like my angelfish and things like that because they used to love it. Yes. Used to make a hell of a mess in the tank, mind.
That was the problem because I don't know what the protein level will be like in an egg yolk, but it's going to be quite high. And the fry didn't eat it all. They don't eat it all. There's a lot of waste that just has to be broken down by the filtration system in the tank, or water changes or whatever. And with tiny fry, the last thing you want to be doing is water changes because you're sucking most of the fry out.
Yeah,
the water change.
Yeah, that's right.
Those were the interesting days, but that angle to it is what really interests me. I love it with feeding fish. That they'll eat anything, and it's part of the fun of feeding your fish is to actually feed them on things like, I don't know, bits of shrimp or, bits of orange, bits of lettuce, cucumber, courgette, sweet potato.
Yeah, because I mentioned to you on the phone yesterday, and I don't know if anyone watching. I mean, we'll do a bit of a Q&A in a bit because we've got. Where are we now? We've probably got about 5 minutes before they kick us off, or maybe a little bit longer about 10 minutes because we didn't start till about 9:05. And I mentioned to you about finicky fish. Now, almost everybody who's been either watching this or commenting on the stream has probably at some stage or another encountered a fussy fish or a fish that won't eat or refusing to eat or whatever. And I said to you, I used to find that with new discus. If you put new discus in, and obviously it's an unfamiliar tank, I had some quite big discus in there. I mean, I'm talking 8-inch diameter, pretty big fish. And an old boy years and years and years and years and years ago mentioned to me, "Oh, you want to try orange peel in the tank?" And I thought he was bleeding bonkers. I thought he was off his head. So the one day I thought, well, it's not going to hurt. You put cucumber in the tank, you put courgette in the tank, it's not going to hurt. The worst that'll happen is it'll go soggy. You just fish it out with a net and throw it in a bin. So I tried it. And I basically just literally wash an orange, because obviously sometimes they've got wax and stuff on them and you don't know if they've been sprayed with whatever. So just wash it, take the sticker off, don't leave the sticker on. Peel your orange and literally just float it in the tank, and I thought, wow, this is crazy. But for some reason, I don't know why, whether it's like we said yesterday, whether it's the vitamin C, whether it's some enzymes or some other vitamins or something coming from the orange peel that stimulates the appetite. But I used to find with discus especially, if I did that and then offered bloodworm, it was crazy. The transformation was crazy, and it would just stimulate their appetite. And I tried it on numerous occasions, and often I'd leave the orange just floating around, just leave it in there till it went a bit mangy, and then take it out, put a fresh one in. And I don't know if anyone else has ever tried it or ever even heard of it, but it works for me. I mean, we were talking yesterday about appetite stimulants. So spirulina is one, garlic is another one. My experience with orange is it works for me. Do you know what I mean? And then
interesting. I don't know exactly why orange would be, because I know we talked about it some time ago, and I've not heard of a lot of people that have used it, but it certainly works. But you're right, appetite stimulants, things like garlic, salt is another one in small quantities. You know, it's a bit like us, isn't it? If you have chips, they taste great. If you have a bit of salt on them, they taste even better. And it's that's
so
sort of a reaction.
When you say salt, are you talking about aquarium salt, or are you talking about, you know, the table salt, or whatever?
It's just the salt that is in the food. So you wouldn't.
Okay.
You wouldn't want to be adding too much to it, but you can, if you were making your own food, you could add a tiny amount of salt to the food, and that would trigger. It's certainly fish seem to be, I don't know, they're attracted to it and they eat it. Just putting it in the water won't trigger their appetite.
The salt and pepper.
Yeah, that's it. It's just it's that doing something to the food. But you've got some others. You've got things that move. You know, we were talking about things like brine shrimp, earthworms, bloodworms. Anything that moves triggers that feeding response as well. So,
yeah, I know some people who keep some bigger cichlids. They'll feed them like freeze dried mealworms as well as live mealworms as well.
Yeah, and I think again they're moving. The thing to remember is just if you're feeding those live foods, there's not a lot of food in them. You know, they're probably 80% water, so you've got a lot of bulk and not a lot of food there. So it's a case of using them as a treat rather than as the main food.
Yeah.
If that's the case, that's fantastic. And you can use all sorts. Anybody that's goes fishing, they'll come back with maggots and worms and maybe bloodworms and sweet corn, all of those sort of things as an occasional treat are fantastic, and the fish really go for them. You just want it to be the main food. It's just part of that mix that the fish will eat. We've
got a few. There was a question like further up in the stream. I just noticed it. Somebody said, what is the benefits of feeding oak? So with regards to your oak and algae wafers, I'm guessing that refers to.
Yeah. When we started with the oak and algae wafer, the aim was to have a food that provided the roughage and the lignin that you would get in wood. And we all know that a lot of the plex and a lot of the agriculture, they just graze, don't they? Constantly grazing on the wood. So we were trying to produce a food that had wood in it. And there's a few companies out there who've done it already. Sierra had a wafer that included wood. But what we, as always happens, as part of the development process, firstly, we started to use different woods just to see if it made a difference. And then just a chance conversation with an aquarist up in the northeast who said that they actually they got oak twiglets and put them in the tank, and their picoltia and panax grazed on and just stripped the bark off them, and then they'd take the branch out and put another one in, and it was they were just stripping the oak bark off. So we actually found a supplier of oak bark and started to use oak bark in the wafers, and it just worked. The fish liked it. We got a great feeding response, and it was a an ingredient that we could get that was, you know, normally it's just composted or is, you know, used for mulching.
Yeah.
So we could actually use it as a really good part of the diet.
Well, funny you should say that, because keeping shrimp, I've not like kept a million different shrimp, but I mean I've kept neos and I've kept some caridinas, and the UK has got such a great array of natural sort of botanicals, leaves, twigs, woods that you can use in your aquariums. That especially I've been using oak leaves, beech leaves for years, and anyone who's ever put a catappa leaf or, you know, almond leaf in their tank for their shrimp, they'll often find that lots of the other species will graze on that as well. I mean, I know ottos have. I know my plex have. Excuse me, my plex have done it in the past. But yeah, and I know that my oak leaves used to be turned to skeletons in in a matter of weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether that was more due to me parboiling them first to make sure that they sank. But yeah, so I suppose that there should be some sort of truth in that. Well, it obviously is, because you've used it in the food. So
I mean, we're using it in a format that they're digesting fully. If you look at a lot of the leaves, I think the fish and shrimps are partly grazing on what's on the leaves, and the leaves are almost secondary, aren't they? They're feeding on the biofilm, and as part of that rasping and feeding behaviour, they're taking in parts of the cuticle and parts of the leaf as it breaks down. But I mean, the one thing we didn't do was to try leaves in the food. That would be quite a neat thing to do. I'm sure you could get hold of it, get sort of an oak leaf powder that you could actually include in the foods. Be interesting.
Yeah. Because we talked about the shrimp foods yesterday on the phone, and I said to you about using nettle, because that seems to be a really popular one among shrimp keepers, especially people who make their own shrimp foods, and they put it into, like, I said to you, they dry the leaves, they mix them into a powder, and again, going back to the egg, they use the egg white to bind it all together, roll it into a dough, and then it's sort of sliced into sticks and then cut into smaller, like little, almost like the size of a Wrigley's Extra chewing gum, you know, but flat.
Yeah.
That sort of size. And then they use those to feed their shrimp. So I don't know whether that would be a nice sort of food or avenue that Fishscience could perhaps go down or investigate.
In terms of the ingredient for the shrimp food, we looked at nettles, and we actually found that we got a really good response when we were using alfalfa, and it's a similar style of ingredient. So we use quite a lot of alfalfa in the shrimp food, and that provides that nutritional profile that the
okay, so you would use alfalfa as opposed to nettle, even because it's got a very similar like makeup, if you like.
I mean, for us, that would be the kit. And also, if you're producing something commercially, then it's great to be able to contact a producer of alfalfa meal or alfalfa, and you can get that pretty much all the way through the year. Whereas with nettles, you can buy nettle meal, but it's very seasonal. So of course, you know, through the summer, there's loads of nettles. You can go out and harvest them and dry them, and that's easy to do in a small scale. But doing it in a slightly bigger scale commercially, it becomes a bit of a problem.
Right. Well,
you know, it's a great thing to use. Again, for me, part of the excitement of feeding whatever.
I'll just apologise to everyone for cutting off, because Instagram only gives you an hour, and I can't believe an hour's passed so quickly. I'll let Dave finish off saying what he was saying about nettles and being commercially viable, and then perhaps we can, open it up for people to ask questions, if that's all right with Dave.
That would be perfect. Yeah. All I was saying on the nettles is they tend to be seasonal. So, you know, if you're producing small amounts of food and you're doing it for yourself, then nettles are great, but they're just not available in big quantities, or I haven't found supplies of them in big quantities that you could use in the commercial production of food.
So what have you got any more? I mean, apart from the discus food, we know that's in the pipeline. Have you got anything else? What else is planned, or aren't you allowed to tell us?
No, I don't, there's no secrets. Probably the next food after the ones we discussed already, the discus food is certainly there, and then I'm looking at a big sort of worm pellet, so similar to the small worm pellets we've got, the 1 mil pellets, but probably a 4 or a 5 mil sized pellet for the sinking, the bigger catfish, the rays, some of the more predatory fish. So we would add a bit more herring meal into it and make it a bit more of a carnivore food.
Yeah, because I think what a lot of people may not know about Fish Science is you produce food for like public aquaria as well, don't you?
We do a limited range. We've got it's like a paste or a gel food that we produce, and we've got a herby version and an omnivore version, and the guys in the tanks, I mean, some of it's used for feeding the big turtles or supplementing their diets, and it's also smeared onto rocks and corals for the marine fish and for certain some of the freshwater tanks. So yeah, it's just a powdered food. We sell it to the zoos in, I think it's 1 and 5 kilo bags, because of course they're doing everything in. It's just like the hobby exploded, isn't it? They've got massive tanks, whereas we've got
much bigger quantities.
Yeah.
Have you? I mean, excuse my ignorance, because obviously I don't keep marine. So have you got a marine food available?
We've got just a marine krill flake, which is originally we did that as just for marines, but what we found was that so many people were using it as a colour enhancer, because it was really rich in krill. So I think there was 27-28% krill, and it's actually a really interesting story in terms of the development. We wanted a marine food for invertebrate eaters, and we came up with a formula, and in the trials the flake didn't really work. The fish ate it, but when the fish want it and when they're just eating it because because it's there and because they're hungry. And I actually spoke to an ex-colleague of mine in the research department, and he said, what grade of krill are you using? And my knowledge was that there was a grade of krill and that was it. But actually you can get krill powder in a range of different grades, right up to sort of sushi standard, which is ridiculously expensive, and down to pet grade. And we were using the pet grade stuff. We just upgraded to a much higher quality krill, and the difference was just like chalk and cheese. The fish really went for it, and that made a fantastic food. But just so many people were using it for guppies and for the rainbow fish, and using it for barbs to enhance the colour, that we've actually swapped it a little bit, and now we just call it a krill flake, and we've got both cherry barbs and a clown fish on there, so it can be used for both.
Okay, I'm gonna have to try that one, because what have I got in my tank now? I got a Pistogramma cacatoides.
Okay.
So you've got the blue and yellow and the big red tail.
Yeah.
And then I've got rummy noses with their red noses. I've got cardinal tetras. I've got tons.
Yeah, and certainly having the krill really boosts the red. That's the red, and to a lesser extent yellow, but the red really kicks it. So that would work really, really well.
Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to ask you. I wonder if anyone in the stream has got any questions for you or me, or on anything. If anyone's got any.
I saw somebody asked about where they could get the Fishscience foods, and the best bet, I mean, it's available in the shops. If you Google it, you can also find it from some online suppliers. But if you just have a look on our website and look on the stockist list, it will give you a list of all the stockists around the country, so that you can find out where you can get hold of it from.
Yeah, I wanted to stock it, but I'm not VAT registered, so I can't.
It looks like you are looking at that tank.
Oh God, no. No, they're my I know. No, they're my where did I get those? I think I got those off you when I did the last workshop.
I think so. That was down in Swansea, wasn't it?
In Swansea, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And that shop has since closed, unfortunately.
Oh, is it? Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, I mean, it was bad for Ben and John. He won't mind me saying. He's a good friend of mine, Ben. Yeah, they got given 6 months to get out of their garden centre place where they were, and they've been there for 20. Well, was it 20 years? They've been there a long time. The business has been going for over 20 years, but I'm not sure if they've been in the same place that length of time. But they've been there for a good number of years. And then they were basically given 6 months to get out. They had to try and find a place fairly quickly, so they decided to try and move their shop up nearer to where they lived, up in Swansea. But the problem is they built up a clientele where they were, so of course those guys are then not going to travel 30 miles up the road to the new shop. So they then had to kind of basically start a whole business in a new place entirely from scratch, which unfortunately I just see the question now, which unfortunately it just didn't work out. But I think John has never been happier because he's delivering fish for a wholesaler. And Ben, I think he's working for a company now, not anything to do with aquatics. But he's on about setting up a fish house, and kind of doing it on a lower scheme. Right.
It's getting a hobby again.
Yeah. Let's answer that question. Okay. Question for you, Dave. It says, where is the shrimp food coming out? But I'm guessing he means when. That's from Pat's Fish Tanks.
Okay. Well, I hope it will be available in the next 4 to 6 weeks. The label is finalised. The production is scheduled for the end of next week, and then it normally takes kind of a week or 10 days just to pack and obviously finalise everything, and then the shipment over to the UK. So I would hope within 6 weeks at the outside. As I mentioned earlier on in our chat, normally I can be very precise on how long it will take. But
not in this situation.
No, things are taking a lot longer, and certainly the transport is becoming quite a lot of an issue for us. But 4 to 6 weeks we'll have it.
Okay. And there was one for me then from Pat again. What's my favourite Fishscience food and why? Because you can see that I have a load of them. To answer your question, I've not tried them, so I haven't got a favourite, but my fish's favourite is probably the flakes. Because it doesn't seem to matter what fish I've got in there, be it a tetra, a pleco, a corydoras, an otocinclus, my apistogramma, even the shrimp. If I stick the flake food in there, they all eat it. And then probably the second favourite of all my fish would probably be the worm pellet, because I've tried it on a range of fish now, and The tetras love it. Even if they're not big enough, I've seen them pick it up and swim around. Looks like they've got a basketball sticking out of their mouth, swimming out of the tank, which is really funny. And then my angelfish absolutely loved it. My rams, when I used to have rams, I never know how to say it. Ramesi or whatever they're called. They loved them, and I actually had fry off them. Yeah, so that would probably be, like I said, I haven't got a favourite because I've not tasted them. I don't think they'd be. It wouldn't be enough to sustain me.
A couple of interesting things just to follow on from that, Richie. What in terms of trying the food, I really remember when I first started in the industry and doing the consumer shows with Tetra, there was a guy from it used to come to the Yorkshire Aquarist Festival, so that shows how long ago it was, and he would come along, ask what new foods we'd got, and he would try them in front of you, pinch of food, and he would eat them, and based on on his taste, he would either buy the food or he would just dismiss it and move on to the next. But he tried every one of the foods over the years that I went to the show.
Oh, I'd love to give him a worm pellet. They smell awful.
And the other thing which you'll like to know is we're just changing again improving the formulation and the formula and the format of the microgranules, and they will become like a mini worm pellet. So it's the formula is changing a little bit closer to the worm pellet formula.
Okay.
We're adding earthworm and mealworm to it, and it'll just be a little 0.5 millimeter pellet. So if you've got some of the tetras where the worm pellets are slightly too big, this new pellet that we've got, they just go nuts for, and it's about 0.5.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about worms, but they seem to love it. Good old Deb's Fish Tanks. She said her cabinet looks like she sells Fishscience as well. But why did you start up Fishscience?
Fishscience started as a conversation over a drink with an ex-colleague who worked for Protix and asked me if I thought there was any mileage in having an insect meal, a fish food based on insect meal, because this guy was obviously trying to push the insect meal that the Protix guys were making, and that was really where Fishscience started from. As I said, my plan wasn't to start another food when I left Tetra, but the idea of, it's like a light bulb moment, the idea of actually using insect meal in a fish food and then trying it and seeing the feeding response that we got from the fish and the benefits, we just had to do it. So that's where Fishscience came from. So started with one food, and now we've gone to a whole range.
Okay, and we have another question from Pat's Fish Tanks. I like Pat's questions; they're pretty good. Are you planning to do different sizes of the stick-on fish treats?
At the moment, no. But the treats are an interesting area. I'd love to do sort of short-term runs of foods, a little bit like the white Kit Kat idea. So we could come up with a blackworm. We could get a quantity of a neat ingredient like blackworm. We could make a treat and just have it as a limited run for however long it takes. We could do a whole range like that. We could do a krill one, or we could do a Brussels sprout one for Christmas. I don't know. There's a whole range of ones that we could just do just for a short time. Really
turkey dinner fish food.
Exactly. Yeah, Christmas dinner. That would be good.
I like that. That's great. Oh, great. Aqua Jardinery has joined. I'm not sure whether that's Ed or Adrian, but they joined in. There's a question for me here somewhere. Ooh, what is the most unique fish I've ever kept? Oh, flipping heck, I've kept so many. One of my favorites was my black arowana. He was amazing. I loved him. I should never have sold him. I've kept red belly pacu, which as a young, inexperienced fish keeper, decided to buy them thinking they were red belly piranha, and then I realized that these things get to about 4 feet long and probably weigh the best part of 60 pounds in weight when they're fully grown. And I thought, I better get rid of this guy pretty quickly. I've kept, what else have I kept? I kept ghost knife fish. I've kept glass cats. What else have I kept? Loads of different L numbers, loads of different plex and ancistrus. What else have I kept over the years? But again, my favorite have got to be discus. I'm sorry, they're my favorite fish. King of the aquarium.
Yeah, fantastic thing. I mean, I have to say, I've kept discus in the past. My personal favourite is just a tank full of angels. I just think they're great.
Yeah, I mean, when you see a nice tank full of altums, that is that's a sight. That's a sight to see, especially a big tank with altums.
Yeah,
I mean,
they just, and then the fish that can go with them, the corries and like the the rummy nose. That would be my choice.
Yeah, I think I'm lean. It's funny because I've looked into or been into most parts of the hobby over the years. I've not really ventured into marine because it's just too much faff. I mean, they look lovely, but I just can't be bothered with all that faff and equipment and salt and all that nonsense. I can't be bothered with all that. The aquascaping side I love because I like creating things. I like looking at a glass box and thinking, look at a glass box, look at a box full of rocks, a box full of twigs, and just think, oh, what can I come up with?
Yeah.
Today, how do I make it look? But I've been increasingly lately more and more drawn to biotope style and natural style tanks. I think I was talking to you yesterday about it. Recently I did a fluval flex for a customer. And there wasn't really much of a brief. It was just the fact that his father-in-law wanted a tank. They wanted it to look natural, and he wanted it to have lots of colourful fish in there because he's got dementia and he likes to count things. So I thought, here's my opportunity. Let's do a biotope style tank. And so that was the last tank I did. And I really enjoyed it. Simple. It didn't take me too long to do, and it looked great. I really liked it. So when my next tank arrives, I'm going to be going down the more natural route as opposed to a full aquascape tank. I still haven't decided yet whether I'm going to plant it or whether I'm going to just keep it sort of hardscape only with sand and maybe some botanicals and stuff like that. I'm not sure yet. I haven't decided yet. But for Pat's fish tanks, if he's interested, I'm not going to promote my YouTube channel, but I am going to do a video on like how I got started in the hobby and kind of touch on fish that I've kept and different tanks and disasters and things, successes and stuff that I've had over the years. It's just going to be me talking at a camera, so if you can stand listening to me for ages, then it might be a video that you might be worth looking at. I think there's another question for you here. Are you going to use pollen in any of your foods, and do you think it's possible to find a supplier to resource?
I think it is. I don't know enough about it to know how it would work, and what the benefits were. But obviously, there's the benefits of bee products, whether it be pollen and some of the various other things that originate from bees, beehives, and bee production, have some great nutritional profiles, and I'm sure would be good for fish. I haven't looked at them, I must be honest, and we haven't got any plans at the moment to use them. But that's probably just, you know, my failing in not having gone to that stage of actually looking.
I know natural bee pollen is used a lot in shrimp keeping. And I know Denali do sell something that's got bee pollen in it. I'm not 100% sure. Debbie might be able to clarify that, because she's just had some stuff from Denali. I'm not sure if that was included, but I know that they do a pollen for your fish. And I know a lot of the sort of fancy shrimp keepers use pollen with their shrimp. I don't know whether there's some sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe something within the pollen that stimulates a breeding response or whatever. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I don't know the details of what's in, obviously, what the nutritional profile of pollen, and I'm sure it changes. You know, it must change from one type of pollen to another. So I'm sure you can actually select pollens to give you the benefits that you need. It's something that would definitely be worth looking at.
From what I've looked into, to buy 100% natural pollen, bee pollen, isn't cheap. It's for what you get. But then I'm saying with shrimp, you don't use a lot. So I suppose on a commercial scale, it might be easier and obviously cheaper to produce pollen for, you know, commercial use.
I mean, obviously they sell it, don't they, in health food shops and what have you. So it's clearly available in big quantities, and it would just be a case of spending some time and you know, some effort in doing the research to find out what works and how much you need to add and what the benefits would be. But we're you know, always looking for different ingredients and just different ways of coming up with a new type of food and a new ingredient that will just really make the foods better. So we're constantly looking to improve and constantly taking feedback from people. So, you know, comments like that are just superb, because you know, nobody's got a monopoly on good ideas. So if anybody's got some good ideas, I'm always interested to look and see if we can make something of them. Yeah.
No, and it was a question for me then from Aquascape and Pete. Have I ever broken a tank? Touch wood, no, I've not broken a tank, but I have poured water all over my feet several times and nearly flooded the house.
That makes you not very popular. I remember flooding the university when I was doing my research. We had tanks in a cold room, which was on the top floor, and I was just running water into one of the vats, and then I had a phone call, and then distracted, like a lot of us have, and then suddenly there was water coming through the ceiling. So I remember doing that.
Yeah, the one thing that stands out to me was I went to a client's house. I had just topping the aquarium back up, and I was just stood there with the hose in the tank, and I was just gassing away. And the next thing I thought, that's weird. I can hear dripping sound. Where's that coming from? And I looked down, and I'm literally paddling in water. I'd literally just overflowed the tank while I was talking to this customer, and they didn't even stop. They didn't even stop me to tell me it was happening. They were just carried on talking, and it was like, oh my God, quick, shut the water off. And me being me, my initial reaction was to try and stick my thumb over the end of the hose pipe, and thinking, what use is that going to do with the tap still turned on?
Just spraying it everywhere.
Oh my God. Oh, Pat's fish tanks. Here we go. Here's another one. Discus being my favorite fish, how many discus would I recommend to start with to end up with a breeding pair? Okay, well, it depends on the size of your tank for a start off, but I would never recommend any less than 6 to 8 discus, because they're a shoaling fish, so they like to be in a shoal. So 6 to 8 and more being better. So, you know, the more the better, and then they'll naturally pair off. And when they get bigger and they get to sexual maturity, it's easier to tell the sex then of a discus. They do give you clues, but it's not always correct. So you've got to wait until they're sexually mature before you can tell sexes of the fish. But they will naturally pair off, and often not in the pairs that you would want them to pair off in either.
That's always the case, isn't it? Never do what they're told.
Yeah, a Turk will go and pair with a pigeon blood or a Marlborough Red will pair off with a leopard, and you're like, no, we don't want you to do that. That's not what I want. There's another one for you here. What kind of worms are in your worm pellet?
We've got in the worm pellets, there's over 40% worm, so just under half of the pellet is made just of worms, and we use earthworm, mealworm, bloodworm, and silkworm. So those are the four types of worm. But the earthworm is, to me, the key. That's the one that you can smell when you smell the food. It smells.
Yeah, reminds me.
Not that I go around sniffing worms, but it smells wormy.
Yeah, it does.
And that was the one that we had the big problems actually getting a reliable supply. We touched on it yesterday that we had the formula for the worm pellets probably 3, 4, 5 years ago, but just couldn't get a reliable supply of earthworm. And it took us a long time before we could find somebody that would just supply it on a regular basis. Once we got it, we could produce the food, because it's pointless trying to do it and not have the food for a while and then not be able to supply it, and then have it and then not supply it. You've got to be able to supply it continually. Yeah,
consistently. Yeah, especially to make it commercially viable.
Yeah, otherwise people, they'll either bulk buy, and then obviously all the foods have got a shelf life, so you don't want to be getting people having old food. I'd rather that they bought fresh food that was as well within its shelf life and at its best.
Yeah. Well, if there's anyone else who've got any more questions, then put them in the comments below. If not, then I suppose we should wrap it up there. Dave, we've been hour and, let's have a look, nearly hour and a half now.
Fantastic.
So it's flown. And I can hear a beer calling me. So just to say thanks to everyone. Thanks, Dave, for spending your time and talking to me and answering people's questions. And hopefully catch up with you again soon as this is all over, and perhaps we'll do another workshop. Who knows?
Yeah, definitely, and another one of these at some stage. It would be great.
Oh, definitely, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right then.
Fantastic.
See you soon.
Good to see you. Cheers then. Bye.
Bye.